Good morning. You're listening to Drinking Social, the official Untappd podcast.
Your inside look into what's happening in the Untappd community and the world of beer.
I'm John, and this is it. This is the episode I never thought I would have been excited about when I first decided to chase every unique and inspired adjunct-heavy craft beer in the world. This is the episode of the core beer, the shelf heroes, the beers you grew up on, maybe not. Moving on, we're going to focus on two beers that we make reference to on the show often here at Drinking Socially. Harrison actually put one on his Mount Beermore. There's never been a better time to feature these beers, except maybe flagship February, but we'll get there. But the world has really seen a jump in packaged beers, people buying craft and beer in volume. So these are the beers that you see on the shelf every time you're hunting for a new 4-pack. They became the star of the last few months. So today we're going to drink two of the best.
And I'm Harrison. And if time is a flat circle, then today we're back at the beginning, which may also be the end if my understanding of circles is still correct. What I was saying is the beers we're about to drink were some of the first craft beers I've ever had, and they could also be the last two beers I ever have, stocking my yacht with them as I sail off into the sunset towards my private island someday. Now, that's a long shot, but these two breweries, they dared to dream bigger, and we're all fortunate to be living in a world full of amazing beer because of that. So today I'm going to dream a bit bigger as well, but first, Drinking Socially is released every other Wednesday morning. It can be found at podcast.untappd.com.
Or YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts, of course.
Right.
And here we are again, Harrison, kind of coming together digitally. It's really nice to see your face again. That's a little bit closer to the way we used to record. And I've seen you checking into some pretty cool stuff. Any favorites? I know we had Memorial Day weekend here in the States where we celebrated that apart, right, but together via your check-in feed. You make me jealous. Where's your highlights, man?
That's right. One really kind of stood out above the rest for me this past weekend. It was Modernism from Flying Machine, a local brewery here in Wilmington.
Yeah, I love Flying Machine. Postmodernism sounds like an art style, but I trust them. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, it's awesome. It's a triple hopped Keller beer, and they use Amarillo and Styrian Dragon, which I never had as the two hops they hopped it with. And it was really, first of all, an amazing beer. They make just great lagers, so that alone, it was crisp and clean. You could see right through it. But to add the hops on top of it, it was really just fantastic. It was full bodied. I could have drank it all day. Didn't though, but really kind of thought about it afterwards for a while, and I smoked a bunch of ribs this weekend and definitely paired perfectly with that. But it's a hopped up lager. You can do it a couple different ways, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This was, I was just really impressed with, again, how good the beer was, and then their take on it, definitely different than any traditional Keller beer, but it worked out great.
Triple hopped Styrian Dragon sounds like Game of Thrones.
I know, exactly.
That's an amazing hop name. I'd never heard of it before either. And you said you paired it with smoked ribs?
Smoked ribs, that's right. Smoked a bunch of ribs on the grill for a better part of the day this past weekend, which we hadn't done in a while, and that worked out really well too. Some homemade dry rub, and then just enjoying this beer among a few other local beers. It's been easy to support locally. We talked about a lot of places doing delivery in town here, but I was kind of in the mood for a lager. Had a different one in mind. Saw this one pop up and was like, let's give it a try. Haven't had it yet, and I mean, man, I'm pumped that I did.
Yeah, you said triple hopped Keller beer. The only Keller beer that comes to mind is the one that I see from Sierra Nevada infrequently.
Mm-hmm.
What is a Keller beer, Harrison?
Right. So technically, it's like an unfiltered lager. So one that doesn't need to be kind of crystal clear and see-through and all that stuff. And it's kind of a broad category. They can be dark, light. Zwickel beer is kind of used
Got it.
sometimes interchangeably with it. But the Brewers Association is going to have hard and fast more, I guess you would say hard and fast rules around it. But ultimately, I mean, I've had light ones, I've had dark ones, I've had ones that taste like Vienna lagers and ones that taste like Helles lagers. Len beers is another great kind of similar style, another like a German kind of country lager, if you will. But ultimately, it's just not pasteurized, not filtered, tons of yeast still in it. But this one, it was really, really clear. They have a great lager program there. We spent some time with the brewers and kind of learned about how much time they take in just making their beer. So that happens. We wait long enough, and it's just going to drop out of suspension. The kind of particulate that can make a beer kind of hazy. Or not crystal clear. So this one was.
That was an awesome tour. I remember going through the Flying Machine Brewery. I miss brewery tours now that I'm thinking about them. Yep. Those guys were incredible.
Yep. Really
so it makes me like a German style lager. The name kind of gives it away, but it's something that it's exciting to hear that the local guys, Flying Machine, made one. I would expect someone like Jack's Abbey or a lager-focused brewery to probably make some, as well as the German ones that we reference, like Hager Shore and guys like that. That's really cool, though. Yep. I'd seen the name a few times, but I never really gave much thought as to why
what it is.
Is that, or why it's so special.
Sure. It's a huge category. I mean, really, it's almost like saying like an American strong ale, which could be a stout, that it could also be a double IPA. Like, it's not that variant, I guess. They're all going to be a lager, and they're going to be relatively same IBUs and stuff. But color wise, if it's, opaque or not,
big range.
Yep, there's a lot of room in there, which just gives you time to be creative, and you also don't feel like you have to. As we've covered before, a lot of German beers have some pretty strict guidelines to them, and this one doesn't. So it just allows for a little bit more creativity there. And they went all in with triple dry hop in this thing, and it's great. I'm probably gonna have another one tonight. I've been trying to wait because I only have 4 of them to go through them, but only wait so long.
I was going to say something, but my dog started barking. That's one of the drawbacks of recording from home with 6 Pomeranians. But that's right. I appreciate understanding that there's a lot of things that can be done to that beer, or really any beer we've had. The guys from Red Oak, we drank their beer on episode 11. Also, they did an awesome job. They're kind of sharing the podcast with friends of theirs, and they shared it on their social media. That was really cool.
That was awesome.
They strike me as the brewer to really try and follow tradition and honor it, but it shows, man. They make some really good beers. I'm excited to go visit them once things relax here.
Yeah, and John, I saw you checking some pretty cool beers, some unique stuff that I didn't even realize kind of what I was looking at that you were having until you pointed out. But you've been going through some awesome beers that we may not see again, or maybe this is now a new seasonal version of something people already know. Anyway, go ahead, John. Tell me kind of what you got. We were enjoying this past week.
Yeah, I got a few comments on Untappd for checking into a couple of. So the one that I think of most easily comes to mind is Key Lime Pie from Westbrook, and I still vividly remember the first time I had their Key Lime Pie Gosa.
Yeah.
And I was like, not only is it lime, but you taste the gram, and this is amazing. Yeah. And it's a great beer. It's easier to find now, which I appreciate. And then randomly, my wife came home with a 4-pack of these 16-ounce cans of Key Lime Pie. And I thought initially, it was like, oh, it's the same beer. They just put it in a 16-ounce can. Perfect. Right. And then I realized that this was a seasonal release from Westbrook. They released it on Pie Day on March 14th.
Got it.
And I believe there's an equation of like how many key lime pies per barrel that if you follow the math, it equals 3.14 on.
All right.
So that was really cool. But also it was a great key lime graham cracker crust. It's a beautiful dessert for the warmer months. And this beer was listed as here I am being unprepared. It was listed as a sour, not a gosa. So there's
Okay.
expectedly a little bit of a change in the recipe, probably that put it in the can and got it to make me smile so easily. But it was easily noticed, right? They were cousins, maybe even half brothers, the key lime pie gosa and this
Right.
key lime pie sour. That was a great experience, though.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I'm jealous, but good on you and your wife for finding that and grabbing it because right, I'm sure if anything, it's seasonal. I don't even know if it comes out every year, so maybe may never come back again. So good snag, John. What else? I think I saw a couple other things go through your feed that I was not familiar with. That sounded great.
Yeah, I got. I want to send a big shout out to a brewery, Platt Park, in the Denver, Colorado area. If I can be honest, I didn't know Platt Park was a brewery. There's a lot of them here in the States, but they were never one that I'd heard of before. And I got a hold of a crowler of their watermelon sour.
Mm.
I mean, it's been warm out here in North Carolina, like oppressively warm on some days. So this watermelon sour, we were hanging out. I think it was last weekend, or time as Harrison referenced a flat circle. But we were hanging out and cracked open this crowler. It was getting kind of late at night. I think we were watching YouTube shows or something. And I poured it into my cup wondering, am I going to be able to drink, a whole bunch of this beer? One sip in, man, it was 1993. I was collecting baseball cards. It tastes exactly like a watermelon Jolly Rancher. It was like barely sour, but to their credit, I don't want this to be a knock, it was artificial watermelon flavor, which is the only real watermelon flavor.
Yeah.
It was a song of watermelon. It tasted like springtime. It was one of the most amazing first sip beers that I remember having in quite a while.
Wow, that sounds great. Yeah, we've been housing a lot of watermelon here. It's kind of that time of year now, and I could put like one down a day if I had to. So I share your love for the Jolly Rancher version and the fruited from the earth version, and the beer version, but I haven't had that one. So that's one that I'm gonna add my wish list. And
that was if you ever get a chance. I've only had one beer from Platt Park, but if you ever get a chance, that beer was so good that I would just recommend buy it just based on their name until someone proves me wrong.
Yep.
Also, one of the guys that works at Untappd in the customer support team, he was back home visiting family in Pennsylvania, and he brought me back a couple of beers from Rotunda out in. I know them as being in Hershey, Pennsylvania. I think they have another operation. I won't remember where, another smaller town in Pennsylvania, but they really get celebrated for their fruited. I think they have a series called Sweet Tart or Sweet Tart. And I had a couple of different beers from them. It reminded me of the first time I had a beer from Drecker. Or like the answer, like a really, or even Flying Machine when they did their really heavily fruited sour. It was just, it tasted like I was getting healthy for drinking it.
And who knows? Maybe you were. There's no way to tell.
No one's proved me wrong yet. Anyway,
well, that sounds great. Yeah, I saw that. Comments on that beer. Their Rotundas in, as you said, John, they have a spot in Hershey and then Annville. As you said, too, nice small Pennsylvania town, not too far away. That's they do some impressive stuff on that fruited sour side of things, as well as they have a raspberry watermelon beer. So look out, John.
Okay, Colby, if you're listening, I need you to go back and visit family one more time.
It looks like their IPA is their top check-in, the Annville IPA. So this is great. All this stuff looks pretty good. Recently released a beer called Social Distancing. The can art is akin to something Burial might make. It looks pretty awesome with a little bit of Tales from the Crypt kind of writing. And it's actually a collaboration with Abomination Brewing. So they do some amazing can art as well. So that makes complete sense.
That's
Cool.
awesome. I think one of these times we really need to, especially as we go more into visual content with the YouTube version of the podcast now.
Hmm.
I'd love to get maybe Kyle Roderick or Rob Brink from Untappd, who does a lot of our design, to drink some beers and focus on label design. Nightmare gets a lot of shout
Yep.
outs because their label design is a great tattoo uh,
Yeah.
or a heavy metal t
I was
shirt.
gonna say exactly. Yep, a nice doom metal T-shirt. Yeah, there's a. I mean, it's. I've heard from spoken with. I think I may have said this already in the podcast, but kind of the from people that I know that do art professionally or professional artists, kind of making a beer can label is akin to what making a record label used to be when people made records. It was kind of like the job you wanted or a really great thing to shoot for that everyone was kind of trying to get their art on a record somewhere, get your art on a can somewhere, and there are obviously a lot of breweries do a really great job with it. We were lucky to have a guy by the name of JP Flexner do all of our art at Neshaminy Creek. He did all our murals, every can art, and he was also a drummer for the band Beach Slang. So we crossed both those worlds of music and beer. But yeah, and he's impressive stuff and has a cool story. But yeah, I love talking to him about it and kind of where it all began for him. And but that's a great idea, John. Get some people in there who who kind of put some of the story behind a lot of the beers we enjoy. The visual side to it. It's the first thing you see.
The one and only time I was fortunate enough to visit Burial, I went to their Raleigh location, and that's how I learned who Dave. I think it's David Paul Seymour, if I remember his three names, is the artist that does their label work. He also does a lot of other stuff. Like you could kind of commission him to draw you a record label, and he would do it as long as it's not beer related. But that's
Right.
that's something I think I always pay attention to, especially if you've gone to the grocery store or bottle shop recently, and you look and you see sometimes like 5 years ago, Trogs redid their whole package
Yeah.
design, and you'll see breweries do this on occasion. It works. It catches my attention. One of the beers we'll have on the podcast coming up in part two, we'll probably talk a little bit about that. But label design is, from my view, it's probably something that's really fun. When it's your job, it might not be fun all the time, but there's been some amazing pieces of artwork that have existed on the labels of beers that I've drank, and I feel bad for not paying enough attention to them.
I hear you there. I know, right? Or at least get it, or find some way to make a T-shirt out of it too. Like there's so many of them. I wish I could have more than just on a can of beer, but have it hanging on my wall. And some you can. So that's a great point. Cool, awesome. Well, speaking of all these beers, let's get to drinking some, John. We've got a lot of history, a lot of stories tonight. May percolate to the surface as we open up some of these beers that for myself and a lot of other people were how kind of they discovered what craft beer was. We're going to start the beginning.
That's a really apt way to phrase it here. Starting at the beginning, I would speculate it almost depends on where you grew up, maybe when you grew up, but I think we're basically taking the East Coast version of wow, beer can be different, and in part two, we'll drink it with the West Coast version of beer can be different. But
Mhm.
I think both of these both of these beers were created in a time when American beer wasn't expected to bring you a lot of flavor. It was a light lager for most of the American beer drinker, and then these came about, and it was I can't imagine what it'd be like trying to make an Uber for motorcyclists or something. Like people would be like, "What are you doing?" No, everything's fine.
Right.
And yet persists. Jim Koch created Boston Beer Co., which is widely successful.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So that's where we're starting tonight with Sam Adams Boston Lager by Boston Beer Company, which, as I'm sure most of you know, is a Vienna style lager, 5% ABV, 30 IBUs, which we'll talk about in a moment. Why I think that's all significant. And from Sam Adams themselves, we're seeing they note that Sam Adams Boston Lager is the best example of the fundamental characteristics of a great beer, offering a full, rich flavor that is both balanced and complex. It is brewed using decoction mash, time-consuming traditional 4-vessel brewing process, discarded by many contemporary brewers. This process brings forth a rich sweetness from the malt and makes it well worth the effort. They go on to say that they use only German noble hops, 2-row barley, which imparts a nice smooth body, but also gives it, lots of flavor, which I can attest to. And they usually use Hellertal, Mittenfrüh, and Tettnanger, is the 2 German noble hops, which I'm really familiar with. Very floral, piney, all that good stuff. So let's open this up. Let's experience it ourselves and see what stories abound here.
This is when you were talking, Harrison. I was trying to listen as you were reading the kind of, we'll say, sell sheet or description for this beer. And as soon as you, like Vienna, you talked about the malts and a little bit of sweetness that come through. Maybe it's our Oktoberfest episode was so much fun to do.
Yeah.
And it was such a realization that lagers can bring just as much flavor and excitement as an ale. Maybe that's not true. Maybe they can't bring as much flavor, but man, there was a time where I looked at Boston Lager and I thought, that's for beginners. I'm drinking advanced stuff here. I'm collecting baseball cards that you'll never get more than once. And don't get me wrong, I love drinking those beers, but there's something like, again, if we look at Italian food or something that's made just with 5 perfect ingredients, there's a beautiful simplicity that you can't replicate by just adding a whole bunch of cool stuff to it that happens in this glass.
Yeah, I would argue it's a lot like almost like baseball. And let me explain. There's a joke kind of that goes kind of throughout my circle of friends where I say something to the effect of, I can't wait to like baseball one day, or like baseball again one day, implying that, when you grow up, everybody plays it. It's exciting then. You get to eat bubble gum and you're hanging with your friends and playing in the dirt. And then maybe, obviously some people keep pursuing it, but a lot of people, myself anyway, kind of discovered soccer, football, lacrosse, other stuff, things that felt more interesting to me, and focused on those as I grew up and grew older. But with this thought in the back of my head of like, I can understand that when I'm kind of spending more time in an armchair, when I have free time to do that, this will be something that, once again, the complexities let us show up. What's the first base coach doing? What kind of slider is that? How do you manage the lineup? All the cool things you don't notice when you first approach something, all the details and the nuances that you start to learn about, and as you immerse yourself in something, or as you just kind of grow and become wiser with age, and through friends liking that thing or whatever, you sort of pick up information, and then later on it becomes a whole new enjoyable experience. Same with golf, not to put too fine a point on it.
Just bashing old man sport.
But I'll tell you what, golf might be a better example, because I remember, I didn't play it growing up. My brother and dad did. Great, good for them. I just remember, though, one day when I was probably about 25 or 26, I was flipping through channels on actually it was probably a March afternoon, it must have been, and I all of a sudden 45 minutes later kind of come to, and I've been watching the Masters for 45 minutes and completely immersed in what I was watching. It's something that clicked in my head of like, oh, I get it. I get the hill, the roll of the hill, the wind, like everything that I was kind of not seeing before comes back. And so that's what this beer is to me. You drink it when you're maybe first getting into craft beer. It's exciting, and then you learn about double IPAs, triple IPAs, Belgian beer, and the crazy world that is, and that's very enticing, and it kind of invites you to experience these other things. And then eventually, and this is what happened to me with this beer, and then Sierra Nevada's Pale Ale for sure, which we'll get to in a minute, something else clicks, and you maybe have this beer again because you haven't had it in a while, and you're tasting different things. You've been out there in the beer world. Your palate's kind of learned what to do. You're picking out senses and smells and textures you weren't at the beginning, and you rediscover a beer, and it's almost like a completely different experience the second time around, and it's much more enjoyable. That is like what this beer is to a T. I think it's got a little bit more bitterness to it than a traditional Vienna style lager, but in a great way, and that right away makes it unique and different. It's beautiful to look at. It's got a great copper color. It's a big old fluffy head. And as you said, the malt in here, it's does crazy stuff. It's jumping all around between like biscuit, bread, kind of toast is happening. It's caramely in the nose, but it's also like kind of someone's crushing cereal in the next room. Like there's all these cool things happening that I would just kind of 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it smells like a beer. But now it smells like all kinds of stuff.
Your analogy to baseball initially confused me and then became perfect. I think I appreciate baseball more now as an older dude than I did when I was younger. And it really, I think it happened when I had to explain the sport to my wife probably 2 or 3 years ago. Cleveland Indians were in the World Series, and it was a really late game. And she's like, "Oh, you got to get up early in the morning." I was like, "Babe, you can't miss this." Like, and I'm trying to explain the count and explain like how you can get so many balls and strikes, and then there's fouls and how those work. And she's like, "Can't you just swing forever and get foul balls?" I mean, yeah, technically, but it was explaining that detail that made me realize I appreciate the sport a lot much more. Yeah. And I think your drawing comparison to this beer is so accurate, because in the sport you could just swing forever and hit foul balls and it'd be a really long game, but there's a lot of balance and nuance in this beer that I wouldn't have appreciated if I was just drinking a beer.
Right. And there's a reason those sports are America's pastime and draw millions of fans and spectators. There's something that all those people see that once you see it as well, you can't unsee it, and unexperience it. And that's the same with this kind of beer. Just when you go on your beer travels and you taste tons of stuff, if you haven't done it, I invite you to re-drink beer if you haven't had in a while, because you're gonna taste stuff you didn't taste before, and it's gonna be a whole new ball game. And that's been a lot of fun, kind of just looking back a little bit in the rearview mirror with more seasoned eyes and going, whoa, I didn't know that always there. It always looked like that. It would smell like that.
Do we have time for a random, but I'm going to say quick Cleveland Indians beer story?
I think we do. This is our show, John. We can, yes. The people of Cleveland, listen up.
Well, maybe. But as part of history, one of the things that I find trivial facts fascinating, and when they relate to beer, even more so. So the Cleveland Indians, I want to say this goes back. I'm not even going to put a year on it. We'll say 1960 to 70. The Indians were playing the Houston Texans. There was a rivalry that kind of was built between these two teams. And Cleveland, the city, had just they got their butts kicked, factory workers out of jobs. It was similar to what happened in Buffalo, where I'm from. Like it was a story I could relate to, where like the city was kind of down on its luck. And then you got the Texans coming into town to play your hometown team. So the Cleveland Indians decide they're going to do a 10-cent beer night. No limits, all game long. So you can imagine, right? Like people are suffering economically. The team is facing a rival, and it's 10 cents per beer. I think the only limit they had was you could only get 6 cups at a time. Then you get right back in line. So I mean, it was a great thing to do for the city, but I believe it ended. I'll spare you all the details. You can hash them out on Google or Reddit if you really want to dig in. But I think eventually, before they ran out of beer, they realized they had a security problem. There was a lot of naked people that were streaking on the field.
Ooh,
Eventually, I think that became so normal that they didn't even try and round up the streakers. They were just like, when
right,
the people start playing again.
right.
And what ended up happening is a fan jumped over and started like trying to take one of the Texans players' ball caps.
Yes.
And the Texans see this from their dugout, so they rush the field trying to defend their player. The fans erupt onto the field, and the Cleveland Indians actually go out onto the field to try and defend the Texans. Like, get together as
Right.
baseball players, let's protect each other so we can
Wow.
finish the game. And it was, anyways, it was pandemonium. 10-cent beers that
That'll do it.
have altered the course of history.
That'll do it every time. Yeah.
I wish I knew what beer it was. If it happened today, it'd probably be like Great Lakes,
Sure.
Elliot Ness or
Yep.
Commodore Perry or something. But
Yeah. Probably. Man, that must have been something else to see that and be in the middle of that. Kind of, yeah, that's happened a couple of times to me. Also, at baseball games, kind of watching the wave of chaos rise, and it goes from everything's kind of fun to like, oh, we might be close to the danger zone to there's a bunch of naked people on the field and no one's doing anything about it. Immediately, the threshold for what's normal kind of shifts, and that's that community that exists there. When something like that happens, it's like, all right, well, let's find the line then. That wasn't the line. Naked people on the field wasn't the line. Let's keep going.
Pushed it back.
Stealing hats.
Maybe it's just, I think this beer too. I'm pretty sure every baseball game, professional, minor league, college, intramural, just as a hobby, swinging a baseball bat out back has
Right.
involved this beer in some way, or at least has been part of it or available there. I would almost say this beer is kind of part of my American pastime.
For sure. Almost 1 million check-ins, 974,000, 460,000 unique, which is, yeah, impressive stuff. And really a great, something else I always like to talk about when we talk about Boston beer and Sam Adams is that they're a great brewery overall. We've, did their Oktoberfest, which we loved when we had it. In that episode, and the same kind of experience. It's been a little bit since I had it, and man, was it great. A lot of people know their summer ale, which is great as well. But they like make a lot of beer. If you live in New England, you see a lot of the time that you may not know about. Like their Boston ale is very good. It's kind of like a pale ale version of a Boston lager. Old Fezziwig is an old ale they make around Christmas every year, which I love. Their Sam 76, kind of like an American light lager, but I believe it's like dry hopped. It's great. I had it not too long ago. So they do a lot of really cool beer you just may not have discovered yet. A lot of them are just new to their portfolio, or not as widely distributed. But I encourage you, if you haven't, to kind of look at what they've got going on and beyond Boston Lager. And beyond their seasonals, because they brew a lot of great stuff. Even their New England IPA that they released a couple years ago was a great style. I remember when they came with a Rebel IPA the first time. I had it on tap, and I was like, "You got to be like kidding me! This is amazing! I would drink this every day." It was hoppy, it was bitter, it was balanced, it looked great, smelled great. So obviously, have competent brewers there. It's an understatement. Even their Noble Pills, that was one of my favorite beers ever when they first released that. It was just like a Czech style Pilsner. It's amazing. So, again, they're one of these breweries. It's kind of, not just stood this test of time, and under kind of some false pretense, like they're innovating, making new things, making things exciting, but also revisiting what they're known for. It's been great today to get back in there and, just have all the memories kind of start coming back. And
they do. Sam Adams makes a beer called Honey Queen, and it's a braggot mead.
Ooh.
And I think it was one of the first that I'd ever had. It was amazing. I remember telling, like, I don't know, it was a quick like pop release. It's not something I see all the time, but when it was available, I remember telling everyone, like, it was like 7.5%, drank easy as heck. That was a really fun beer. And they're another thing I'd like to, kind of give them respect for is their long shot.
Yes.
That kind of celebrates homebrewers. I'm not familiar with how it works exactly. If you're listening and you know, or Harry, if you know, help us out. But
sure.
effectively, a homebrewer submits a recipe, and if Sam Adams or Boston Beer likes it, then that gets brewed in mass and sold in their long shot 12 packs. That's how I remember seeing it, anyways.
Yep, and I learned to brew beer from a guy who finished like whatever the one spot. I think it might have been I guess it was always a 12 pack. I don't know if it was 12 beers or 6 beers, 2 of each, but he finished either like 7th or 13th place of like that one year with his Imperial Stout. Now his Imperial Stout, let me see, is brewed by a brewery in New England under a different name, and you may have had it, and I don't think I can say what the name of the brewery is, but he, after that, when I worked with him, he was developing recipes for breweries on small batch scales, and then he would sell the recipe to someone who needed like an Imperial Stout or whatever. We brewed a couple
like a
beers.
Songwriter kind of like.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they're contract brewer. There's different ways that title's used. Obviously, you can be a contract brewery and you can have a brewery that a bunch of people brew in. You can also be a contract brewer and just design recipes for breweries that are just starting or in between brewmasters or whatever it is. And he kind of fell into that. He was a mechanical engineer by trade, just a genius of it. So very mechanically inclined, super logical guy. And his guy he brewed with was a microbiologist by trade. So I fell in kind of cahoots with them right after college, being a biology major myself. And it was like, this is amazing. I can kind of nerd out with these guys who are in their 50s while listening to ELO in his barn and drinking beer at 8 a.m. This is it. I'm hooked. Like, let's sign me up. What do I have to do this forever? But he just landed right outside it. But he had a cool, I think actually Jim from Sam Adams wrote him a letter thanking him for submitting his beer. He had his whole basement was full of like blue ribbons from other things he'd won, other homebrew competitions he'd won. But yeah, it's that was one we spoke about. I saw the long shot like on his wall, and I was like, "What's that about?" And yeah, it's almost there.
But I'm sure many others. The one I remember, or the second version of that I remember seeing, came from Ballast Point. There, I think they called it the Homework series or something of that nature.
Right. Yeah.
But that's I don't know. Maybe it's a recent obsession of mine, but I think home brewers, a lot of the brewers that are coming to Untappd's virtual festival, like almost every one of those breweries began with, I was in college. Someone told me about beer. I made a brown ale. It wasn't good, but I knew that's where I was going to spend the rest of my. I think there's homebrewers don't get as much credit as they're due.
I agree. Some of the best beer I've ever had was made by that man in his awesome red barn in the woods. And yeah, I agree. And I'm with you there, John. It's kind of been chasing that. I'm chasing a lot of those beers ever since, trying to like find breweries that made as a good Imperial stout, or the Scotch ale was amazing. That sort of thing.
Let's get into really granularly, like, what do you define? What makes a beer good? No, I'm kidding. We won't get into that. But there's been some things happening on social media for Untappd. The biggest or easiest way to connect with Harrison and myself and almost 3,000 other fans of the podcast or Untappd is to join us on the Facebook group for Drinking Socially, where it used to be, I'll admit, at the end of season 2, we could interact with almost everyone in that group. But now in season 3, the badge has brought a lot of new people. Untappd TV has brought a lot of new people. It's a great problem to have, that we can't really keep up with all the activity that's happening in there. But it's always, the group is moderated, but everyone in there, it's not, people are posting content about beer. It's in my eyes, it's one of the few safe places left on Facebook. But I'll stop shamelessly plugging our podcast group. Harrison, any posts you've seen recently that kind of jumped out at you, or you want to just draw attention to?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So Dan Canoy, I hope I'm saying your last name correctly, but he's been killing it. He's posting a couple times a week for at least a month or so now, if not longer, of a picture of the beer he's checking in and enjoying and a cigar he's having outside, cigar and beer, sometimes some cheese, some meat, some hot dogs, whatever else he's enjoying, picture by the pool. It's been a lot of fun to see that, but I've been kind of now accustomed to looking forward to what he's going to talk about next. And that's something I enjoy too. A nice cigar and a beer, some smoked meat ain't bad, as we kind of discovered or talked about the ribs earlier. Definitely a fan of all those things, but great to see him doing it. He's nailing it. The vibe is great. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you got next, Dan. So keep it coming, man. That's been great.
There's one side note is I realized that people take 3D pictures.
Yes.
Or some sort of magic happens.
Right.
On
Harry Potter picture. Yeah.
Totally missed out, but every time I see one of those photos, I just stop and check.
Right.
There was someone you were interacting with, Harrison, Waylon in the group that had a photo of his fridge,
right.
And he had 2 like mini kegs of Bell's Oberon beer in there.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
that was really cool. One of the guys in the group, Andrew, made a post that got a lot of engagement, rightfully so. It was like a picture post, and I don't know. Anyways, it said in the picture, "We forgot our PPE," and then he's got a picture of like an ultrasound and a baby coming. He says, "My wife's not going to be consuming alcohol until December," and he asked for some recommendations on non-alcoholic beers. What I love about the group is he received plenty of congratulations, but also like 20 people offering.
Yeah.
If you're looking for non-alcoholic beer, it's not a beautiful world for you to live in, but it's nice to maybe have some recommendation or help.
For sure, better now than it has been.
Yeah. And then it kind of got me wondering, like, we've seen hard seltzers jump up. Is there a world where NA beer is a craft option?
Sure.
And I'm not gonna. We won't dive into that right now, perhaps, but we'll see. There's definitely been, as we kind of alluded to from the intro, the way that we consume beer has certainly made a quick, stop on a dime adjustment in the last few months. Where Sam Adams Boston Lager, this beer's been selling, I don't know, 20% more this April than it did last April. Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, Lagunitas IPA, all those core comfortable, meatloaf, mashed potatoes beers have seen a lot more activity than they did the year previous.
Yeah, awesome.
What else? Harry, virtual festival. Harrison and I are going to be part of that. That's going to be hopefully entertaining for those of you that are familiar with us and able to join the show. How's the update on that looking, Harrison?
So it is sold out, which is pretty cool. So hope you grabbed your tickets and your packages, and your beers will be on the way shortly. There is still time though and ability to grab the BYOB stream package where you're be able to contribute to the charity you're working with, Restaurant Strong, and also watch whatever the heck John and I do along with Greg and our esteemed guests from the breweries will be imbibing the beer from. But yeah, so if you haven't grabbed that yet, go ahead and check it out. But it's sold out, so that's pretty exciting. Thank you for that. We're pumped to, hopefully not make total fools of ourselves. It'll be entertaining. If it's entertaining in the way we want it to be or not, is what we'll be, laughing with us or laughing at us. That whole thing, we'll figure that out as we go. A little bit of both.
Laughter either way, but yeah. That'll be a fun. I think I'm excited to see what Untappd can do with that, and even though it's just digital, I'm really excited to see if maybe in years in the future we could do a worldwide event. There's always a hang up. How do we get everybody the same beer worldwide would be my first question, but. This one with halftime seems to be pretty exciting. I don't know how we're going to drink that many beers, but it's a good thing we're practicing.
That's right. This is all about practice. Practice makes perfect. That and the wooden leg just goes right into the wooden leg for later.
The only other update I have in terms of for Untappd updates, Obviously, if you're not watching Untappd.tv, or if you haven't checked out our kind of in production media studio, Greg Avola, the founder of Untappd, has been really busy. Every Thursday, there's a happy hour that he'll do with someone in the beer world, and on Saturdays, it's usually very similar. He's did some really impressive or fun guests. My particular favorite so far to watch was John Hall, the journalist. He's like 4 people's personalities shoved into one, and I think he works for all 4 of them as well. But there's been some really cool content. If you follow Untappd on YouTube, you can see all of those shows, whether they were live events or pre-recorded. Going forward, you'll see the Untappd Drinking Socially podcast. Harrison and I will be putting video content on there. So it'll just be our faces and us drinking beer, but sometimes it's nice to have a face to tie a podcast to. And the last thing, if you're listening to episode 12, ideally it's June, and that's Pride Month for Untappd. So all month long, check in any beer, you can get the Pride badge. And I think this is something I'm really proud of. One of the values I remember interviewing for Untappd, and you go through the company's like kind of core values, and largely a lot of them tend to be the same. If you've worked for 3 companies, all of them have like integrity and discipline and on and on. What I value about Untappd is that almost every day, like one of those is really highlighted. And for June, we celebrate diversity literally on Untappd for everyone. And ultimately, the message that I think I can resound with is that everyone should feel welcome at Untappd as a user, as an employee, as a guest. And we really hope that this is going to continue making the craft beer community a safe and inclusive space for everyone. Make good beer. That's what it should be about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's great stuff. Cool. All right, let's get a word in from our sponsor. We'll be back with beer number 2.
Yeah. I'm going to edit that out. Yeah. Want to show off your love of Untappd? Check out our online store and pick up Untappd branded glassware, shirts, sweatshirts, hats, more. Depending on how hot or cold you are, go to store.untappd.com and enter the coupon code podcast when you check out. That'll get 20% off anything you order. That's store.untappd.com. Use the coupon code podcast, 20% off for you. Plus, it lets them know that you guys are listening, and we love that here.
Okay, perfect. So now we're on to beer number 2. John, what's up next?
This one, I'd like to think everyone that considers themselves a craft beer fan has tried at some point. Although if you're looking on the grocery store recently, you'd see it as a really different label. The beer we're talking about is Pale Ale from Sierra Nevada, often referred to as Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, but it's awesome to think that there was a time where this beer was just called Pale Ale before Tiger King beer names and all that. This is a Pale Ale, American style, made by Sierra Nevada Brewery. It comes in at 5.8% ABV and 38 IBUs, which there was a time where that was astronomical. The notes that Sierra Nevada gives us are, this is our most popular beer. It's a delightful interpretation of a classic style, has a deep amber color, as Harrison will show you off in the video here in a second. Full-bodied, complex character, generous quantities of Cascade hops give this pale ale its fragrant bouquet and spicy flavor. And Cascade hops, a member of the C hops family that I might have just built that directory in my own head, but Cascade and Centennial, those hops immediately get me thinking of like Founders All Day and Bell's Two Hearted, and I see Harrison's face light up a little bit. So you've already cracked it open, man. I don't know, how long has it been since you've had this beer, and what do you think of it?
Hours. No, yeah, right. I know, but it's not like a broken record at this point. If you listen to more than one episode of Drinking Socially, you probably heard me talk about this beer, but I really do love it. It's on my Mount Beermore for a reason. It probably is my desert island beer. In fact, I think I've said it is. Quickly though, so yeah, they're celebrating, what would that be, 40 years of being a brewery with this cool package that just John referenced. It's a little bit different. They're celebrating the first run of labels they ever got that were basically misprinted. The colors were all wrong, but they didn't have the money to reorder them, so they just slapped them on the bottle, and now it's a classic. The beer
40
and
years later, that problem still happens to breweries all the time.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, this is a great beer. It's a beer that every brewer has a story about, or can get excited about for a lot of the same reasons as Boston Lager. There's a lot happening here. There's many layers as you expand your kind of beer knowledge and your palate, and keep revisiting this beer again. It's a nice touchstone to come back to and go, yeah, I know that's Cascade hops now. So like with Cascade hop, this is a great beer if you're trying to expand your knowledge. And someone says Cascade, and you go, what does that taste like in a beer? Drink to this beer, and you'll never forget it, and be able to pull that out of other beers that have that hop in it, that share similar characteristics. So I could tell a million stories about it and wax on about it for a while, but I guess suffice it to say that it's great. I had one sip and it's half gone, so it's still my body drinks Sierra Nevada Pale Ale differently than other beers. It's
so remarkably accurate.
It's kind of, the first bottle disappears almost magically, and then
the warm-up bottle. This is my Amuse Bouche.
And then the party begins.
The six pack is dinner.
Oh man, it's awesome. It really does. It has so much flavor. Specific things to note about them, though, they do bottle condition their beers, which is so cool, and especially as much beer as they produce, to know that each one is conditioned in the bottle. That's what contributes to that big old fluffy head, and it helps it last a bit longer, stay fresher, still kind of grow and change a little bit in the bottle, which is beneficial for a lot of reasons. And yeah, just celebrates the Cascade hop. And of course, how much of a pioneer it is. There's so many stories about, they couldn't sell this in New York City. No one wanted to buy it except for like one or two bars. It was just such an alien thing, an alien idea, to have a beer that was just hoppy and bitter and had this much flavor. There seemingly wasn't a market for it, but obviously, as we know now, there certainly was and is and continues to be. But without a doubt, kind of just kicked down a bunch of doors that didn't need to be there for the beer industry, and we would not be sitting here with double dry hopped hazy IPAs if this beer didn't start that conversation now 40 years ago, which is it's cool. And it's obviously everything's relative. You talk to a pub owner in England and they go, 40 years, I blinked longer than 40 years, True. but it's absolutely something to celebrate, and really cool they did with the bottle. Really cool that what's in the bottle is the same every time I have it. As maybe silly or as insignificant as that may sound, it's also something that, as I've dove deeper and just been drinking beer longer, it's something I value more and more, where if I can know that every time I'm going to pick up this beer, it's always going to taste exactly the same, there's comfort in that. And that's what John was speaking about earlier. There's a reason beers like this and Sam Adams are jumping off the shelves right now. People are looking for comfort and stability and some kind of constant. This is it. It tastes the same every time I have it. I drink it a lot, so I would know. I can say that with some authority. But it reminds me of, I don't know, a lot of things. Is it silly to say it feels like an old friend, John? Is that
worse comparisons have been made probably on this show today.
Right.
It's been embarrassingly long since I've had this beer. It's probably been 2 years, maybe even longer, since I've actually bought and drank a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. In the first, as I'm drinking it right after Sam Adams Boston Lager, I feel like this has less flavor than Sam Adams Boston Lager. And I'm probably saying that wrong, but finish is really nice and clean. There is a it's not spicy like, the murder taco at your local taqueria, but there's a clean finish that comes through. In this beer, I feel like I'd be able to. I could drink both of these beers tonight in mass, but I appreciate it's incredibly clear. It's copper in color. It's nothing like you would find on the shelves today if you looked for a pale ale. But when you drink it, I mean, it's beautiful. It's clean. It's balanced. It's 40 years old.
Right.
I mean, that part's amazing. Ken and Sierra Nevada were doing stuff like this, which is still good today, 40 years ago when few people, the world wasn't ready to embrace it yet.
Certainly not.
Although there would be times in the early 90s where this beer would draw, like people would come and buy it out when it hit the shelf.
Right.
Like this was your first white whale, which is incredible to think now, but there's so much amazing history in Sierra Nevada. They took a while to start canning. That was something I hope to be able to ask them. It was 2011 when Sierra Nevada first began canning, and this was the first and only beer they started with. As Harrison mentioned, bottle conditioning all their beers, switching to a canning operation, supplementary. Like I remember it was, I don't remember his last name, Bill, who worked at Sierra Nevada, who made the announcement early on that they were going to go to canning. Other breweries had already began. Sam Adams hadn't done it yet. And Sierra Nevada said, we're going to do it. We're going to try it out with pale ale. We'll test some things. I'd imagine there's a lot of, you can't just take your bottled pale ale and start putting it in a can and expect everything to work well.
Yeah. Right.
But I mean, if you look at where craft beer is now, it's rare to find a bottled beer. We drank both of these out of a bottle tonight, and it felt really good. Actually, we drank them out of glasses, but
sure. But yeah, they began in the bottle. It's you're right, John. There's a lot of things these guys do a little bit differently, and indeed, it's a big ship to swing around when you make a change like that to go to cans, or you add that to your, not a change, but you add that option. But they did it, and now they can a lot of things. And yeah, the great everything about it is executed well, and it's also, as we kind of spoke about with Sam Adams, they're not resting on pale ale and letting pale ale kind of carry them home. Certainly, it does the heavy lifting each year in terms of, I think it's something like, I might be wrong here, it's I thought there's 60 or 80% of the beer they sell is like pale ale. It's most of what they sell, which makes sense. It's their core beer. That would make sense. But they came out with Hazy Little Thing a couple of years ago, which was an amazing take on a hazy IPA. They have Sidecar, which is their orange IPA with orange actually in it, which is a great Otravez, right? They're dabbling in gozes and things like that, and actually doing really well, excelling with it. They have a couple of different versions of that beer now that are really good. They have a lime. It was cactus, I think, and something originally, and now it's lime. And
we were talking with Jen 2 episodes ago, where she was kind of talking about their strange beast.
They're hard kombucha, and hard, not kind of hard, like 7% kombucha. Which is great, and I'm excited for that. I just saw on Sierra Nevada's social media, they posted about kind of the first canning run for wider distribution in, I believe, both around Chico in California and in North Carolina, where their Mills River brewery is, although it may just be California. But yeah, that kombucha is hitting hitting the shelves soon. So if you're in those markets, they're starting kind of there with obviously plans to keep moving with it. But yeah, so right, they're not just sitting around kind of doing nothing. They kind of they do what they've always done. They're pushing the envelope and they're doing what they like, and they're using this like a crazy amount of knowledge they've amassed over the past 40 years to, at that point, you can almost look at some series of spreadsheets and predict the future. I would imagine you must know so much about the past and seen so many things kind of come and go. You probably have a pretty good barometer there of where the next thing is going to be and can be there for it.
At 40 years in, the thing that, I mean, not to take anything away from this, which, as you kind of said, Harrison, this is like what pays the bills for Sierra Nevada. But what I respect and appreciate most about them is that they're not content to just like our Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. We do good with that. I think they're an example of what so many companies should strive to do. You're in that beginning phase where it's just turn a profit, prove your concept, and then you get to that point where you can kind of switch things to autopilot. Mm-hmm. And you could, like, Sierra Nevada could have just chilled with pale ale for a while. Other people might have presented competition, and maybe they wouldn't be in the position they are today if they didn't embrace every aspect of craft beer, like the trip through the woods, the kombucha, the Sufferfest brewing, how they kind of bought or partnered or acquired that as like an athletic-minded brewery. I mean, if it has something to do with craft beer, Sierra Nevada has either created it or jumped right on and added their kind of thumbprint to it, which I think that's an awesome testament to them as a brewery, as a business.
Mm-hmm. Very much the Bruce Springsteen of breweries. Kind of,
I know that's flattery from you.
I keep with the metaphors all day, old Aesop's fables over here. But they, very much you can look at, breweries. Look, I know this for a fact because I've been in the rooms where these conversations have happened. That smaller breweries, younger breweries that are going from local to regional to maybe national and looking at distribution. They're always looking at how Sierra Nevada has done it and what have they done, and they always will. They've done such a good job at every aspect: business side, brewing side, innovation. Like they really just put the roadmap down there. Or if you want to know how to do something well, how did Sierra Nevada do it? And that's just like the boss. He's been hitting the road even longer than Sierra Nevada has, out there still selling out stadiums.
I'm not sure if I'm legally allowed to play any Bruce Springsteen songs.
We'll find out. That's the bar. Keep pushing where's the line? But yeah,
this is something when Harrison and I first kind of looked at season 3, and we were talking with Untappd, like we'd like to figure out a way to do a badge for the podcast and how can we make all that happen. And initially I remember thinking, like, if we do the badge, does that mean we can only do big beers like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, or we can't do big beers like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale? And it's been a learning experience, like knowing that the beers we select for the podcast will also be included in the badge. But this is one, I think, if you're listening to the podcast and you haven't had this beer in 2020 or 2019 or recently or ever, or if you're not listening to the podcast and you have this beer, I hope that it crosses both sides of the street, where you drink this beer and you learn about the podcast and you like it, hopefully, otherwise, sorry. Or you like the podcast and you forgot about this beer. You looked past it in your grocery store. Pick it up next time. It's warm out for most of us, for some of us, for half of us at least. It's warm out. Pick it up. Pick up a 6-pack of it, or a single if you're tepid. But this is something I think if you've been on your craft journey for longer than a year, you'll probably taste this with a very renewed appreciation.
Oh yeah. I do every time I have it. I get excited about it.
For Harrison, it's a weekly occurrence. Talking about the badge for this episode, Harrison, is not a great segue, but I know you said you had some. There's been some shifts, some updates in the Drinking Socially badge.
Yeah, so I figured we'd give you guys an update on the badge itself, since it's been now since the 15th of January when it first launched. It's been almost half a year, 6 months of it out there. So how's it doing? What's going on there? What's happening? What beers are gaining traction that we've enjoyed on the podcast? So far, there have been more than 57,000 badge unlocks. Pretty amazing stuff. And top cities that we're able to see through Untappd that are enjoying this is London's kind of led the way early on. London Pride, having that as a beer available through the badge, has obviously made a big impact. Atlanta, Georgia, right after that, we did a Creature Comforts beer early on in the badge process, so they have time on their side there. Cologne did an awesome Gaffels Kolsch.
That was a great
episode and great beer. Chicago, and then Stockholm as well.
What beer did we drink with Gaffel Kolsch? That was like the
Kolsch. They're Kolsch.
We drank Gaffel's Kolsch. What was the other beer? That was London Pride?
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. That was like a international version of this episode.
That's very well said. That's exactly correct. And then Stockholm and New York, Philadelphia after that. Top venues. I love this. Chicken and Beer, which is in Atlanta's airport. Boom. Creature Comforts, I'm sure, is driving a lot of that, but that's the number one place.
That's incredible.
That's enjoyed this. And this is pretty cool, and kind of the most notable thing we saw is that up until probably only a few weeks ago, London Pride was far and away by about twofold the number one beer that people had used to unlock the badge. However, Daytime IPA that we featured in kind of our low-calorie hazy IPA episode has surpassed it now. There's more than 8,300 unlocks through Daytime IPA, which is really cool. And again, also not surprising how widely available Lagunitas is, and that it's getting, as John said, warmer for at least half of us. Cool note that every single beer that we had on that episode, so Daytime IPA from Lagunitas, Flyjack from Firestone Walker, 1E 100-calorie hazy IPA from Oscar Blues, and Lighthearted from Bell's, all those beers are in the top 10. So I think it's safe to say, for now at least, we were kind of right in the money there, saying that the hazy, low-calorie IPAs would be something people who love beer gravitate towards. It's certainly evident here.
I remember at the end of that episode, we had like a kind of a quick poll or contest where it was like, which beer would you bring to a pool party, to an office party, for a lawnmower? And here we are in the season of those things. Granted, not all of them are possible, right, or advised. Maybe I'm not a legal source of information, but maybe not advisable yet. But here we are, and those beers are starting to take off.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's exciting to see that trend. They were all four of them. Yeah. Here I am just reiterating things we already know, especially if you listen to that episode. But all four of those beers nearly identical in the stat column, right? Like beer style, ABV, IBU, every single one slightly or moderately or a lot different than the next. That was an incredible episode.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, right? Exactly correct. And Daytime is just crushing it right now. So thanks so much for checking into the beers that we've been enjoying here. And if, as John said, it's how you found the podcast, welcome. Cool that you can use Untappd as a choose your own adventure story, and one of those adventures takes you to us. So welcome to it. This is your first time. And we'll keep doing some updates here about the badge itself and what everyone's drinking out there. And as things change, we'll check in periodically. But this is fun to see. And for us, kind of the genesis of this conversation was, holy cow, London Pride out of nowhere, which had been the easy front runner, no longer. Daytime IPA crown champ for now. Although, tell you what, London Pride's still right there, as is Scalpel Kolsch. So we'll see as those lighter beers kind of get picked up a little more and more this time of year.
I'm excited to see what these two flagship
That's right.
identifiers
And then, of course,
do.
right. I think we've just changed the game
Yeah,
tonight by adding these
we
two.
won't
That's
be
a great
seeing Pliny the
point.
Younger upset that list. But
No, sir.
as it was expressed on January 15th, no one is expected, myself included, to be able to max out the drinking socially badge.
Yeah.
It's a fun experiment and something we wanted to do to thank you all for listening. Another thing we're about to launch to hopefully thank you all for listening. It's kind of what we're referring to, Harrison and I, as we're building what's going to be like a 10-part series. Is internally we just call it Beer 101, to imply that it's kind of meant to be a segment of the next 10 episodes or so that kind of focuses on the basics. We all know water, hops, barley, yeast, right? Water, hops, barley, yeast, that makes a beer. But if I gave you all four of those things, what would you do with them? Me, nothing. Right. Harrison, probably make a beer. But I think the goal with this next segment is to try and draw some attention and answer some questions, especially for those of you that found Untappd in the beginning of your craft beer journey. Had an IPA, didn't like the taste, had a sour beer, didn't like the taste, unsure where to go. I find that a lot of times understanding is just helpful. And Harrison's, I'm really excited to kind of unleash some of his beer knowledge. So we're planning again, like about one segment in every of the next 10 episodes to cover some of these details. Any disclaimers or credits or calls to action you want to issue, Harrison, as we try and build that out for episode 13 and beyond?
Absolutely, yeah. So as John said, the plan now is to do about 10 episodes. It'll loosely, as we've laid it out, kind of in two parts, where we'll talk about kind of the materials that you need to make beer, and then the processes. How do you actually take what you have? As John said, we hand you the 4 ingredients that are in every beer. What happens next? How does it become something that you can enjoy in a bottle and not go blind drinking? So we'll kind of talk about those things, have some fun with it. We wanted to do this for a while, so this is exciting. We've kind of found time to do it in a place, and think now is a good time for all that. And that was a big reason why we chose these two beers today too, to kind of start at the beginning as we of a lot of people's craft beer experiences with these two beers we enjoyed today, to also now move into perhaps something new for a lot of people, really kind of get in a little more granularly into the what we're drinking and why it tastes the way it does, and how it goes from being barley in a field to something that's copper, and why is it copper in your glass, and all that stuff. So what we really want, though, is for you guys to all be a part of this, is to not have us be in a vacuum creating things we think you might want to know. If you've had questions about what a coolship is and how it works, or what goes into barrel aging beers, and how do different breweries dry hop? Is there a universal way of doing it, or why does the dry hop beers from Deschutes taste different than Sierra Nevada? So there's stuff like that you want to know. Now's the time, and please, you can email us at podcast@untappd.com, or, as we saw about earlier, join us on the Facebook group, Drinking Socially. It's a lot of fun in there already, but now we're really looking to kind of hear from you guys about what you want to know, what you've always been curious about. This may include some really cool guests. We're hoping that it does. People who names we all know, adding their insights into what makes a great dry hopping process, and why, as an example. And we want to make sure that maybe include some videos and some kind of other supplemental segments we're going to do even beyond the podcast. So we've kind of put a lot of thought into this. We're building it out now, but want to hear from you guys before we launch it and start doing it, to make sure we're actually talking about something that's going to be interesting and of value to you. So we're very excited. It's been a long time coming. We'll look forward to seeing what you say through email or through the Facebook group. And yeah, kind of start this during the second half of season 3 to not just with the beers go back to the beginning, but with beer itself, go to where they all begin, and then see where we go from there.
I think we're hoping that this is somewhat educational for everyone that listens to it, but what I'm really hoping for is that it's educational for me as well. Ask questions, because the hope is that you'll ask things we don't already know, and that'll cause us to learn and then share. And that is, I think you can put that on your LinkedIn, if not your college resume,
Yes.
or CV. What else do we got coming up on the episode 12? We usually do a would you rather. And I know we're asking you guys for a lot of help, but the would you rather well has kind of dried up, or there's some that maybe just aren't super timely. So instead of a would you rather, we're going to pivot. I'm going to ask Harrison a different question. But if you have any that you know would be fun or you think would be funny, if you challenged us with them, of course, we're always looking for more help. Send us a message on Facebook, put it in the Facebook group, email podcasts@untappd.com. We'll put a link in the show notes. But in the meantime, in the lack of a timely would you rather that would tie into this show, I want to ask Harrison. We did this episode on kind of the heroes on the grocery store beer shelf. So these two beers aside,
Right.
what would you say is your grocery store beer shelf hero? You're going to your class reunion and it's being held in Alabaster, Montana, off the main road, down a dirt road. There's one grocery store that has a cold beer sign out front. You don't expect much for craft selection, maybe, but when you visit that really remote grocery store, what's your kind of, which one are you pulling off the shelf that you know is going to get you through a weekend in the mountains? I don't know why we went there, but
That's
we
fine.
did. We're here.
There now, this tiny little grocery store. So I'm hopeful there's a 15 pack of Oscar Blues variety pack. That's any grocery store I walk into. That's a thing I always look at is what do we have? Is the new IPA in there yet? Perfect. If that's not there, it's easy to jump over to like now a 12 pack of Bell's Two Hearted bottles. They just announced they're doing 12 pack bottles now of that beer, which is pretty cool. So that's going to be now on my grocery store radar. But if not a 12 pack, then a 6 pack, so on. That'd be good too to help me, kind of face Peggy Newsome and all the girls I didn't ask to dance in senior prom or whatever I have to do to whatever horrible feelings come back to the surface that have long been dormant. That'll help get them out of the way. But really, kind of my move every time I go to the grocery store now is it's almost like a dance where I'll go over to the Sierra Nevada section, see what's new, see what's happening there, then maybe move over to Oscar Blues and then Bell's and then Highland Brewing Company, which is local, I think mostly they're in North Carolina, but they distribute, I think, definitely somewhat regionally. I like a lot of the stuff they do as well. Their Gaelic ale is kind of crowned as with the first beer of Asheville, which is of course a huge mecca of craft beer now. They do a lot of other really great styles. So that's kind of like and then now Red Oak cans their beer. That was a big deal for me. You shared one with me last week, John, and it kind of blew me away. I've been waiting for that forever. After the episode when we spoke about their Maibach, I enjoyed that, and it was next level. So that's gonna now be, as it was today when I was in the grocery store, part of the thing I look at. Those are kind of my sight lines. That's my rhythm. You see me in the grocery store, you can watch me quietly from afar, and I'll do that move up and down to the door on the left and the door on the right and look at the Oscar Blues and over to Bell's and what's Highland doing, and then settle on Red Oak. And by then I've kind of made a decision. But what about you, John? Do you do any pirouetting or tangoing when you're in the grocery store? What kind of What's your move?
Fun fact about John: I haven't danced since 1988. But so no pirouetting, but I do. There's a method when it's difficult. Maybe it's my personality, but it's difficult for me to go to a grocery store if I don't already if I can't close my eyes and see every beer that's on the shelf. Immediately, I go into decision. What do they call it? Analysis paralysis.
Right. Yeah.
Where I have to look. I'm not super concerned about the economics of it. That's a value point, but mostly I'm like, all right, what beers haven't I had? Are they beers I'm excited about? If I don't find anything in that category, then what beers have I had that not just were good, but that I want another one of right now? So usually sometimes I'll go to Untappd and I'll see what did I say about that beer last time I had it? Or if I haven't, did Harrison drink it, or some Untappd friends from the podcast group, especially if we're looking at regional beers. Have any of my friends had this beer? What did they say about it? But if I'm in a grocery store with a very, very limited selection of craft beer, usually the bigger Sierra Nevada, Sam Adams, even to a lesser point, like Wicked Weed, that once they got acquired by ABI, you see them in new places. Corona, can you call that? I don't know, but sometimes if I'm on a vacation and we're spending the day on the beach,
sure,
there's a part of my brain that connects Corona with this is the beer that's meant for that.
Yep.
So I don't know what beer am I grabbing on the shelf there. It's probably in that situation where there's just an incredibly limited selection. A variety pack of anything is going to get my dollars and cents, because that way I get a couple different beers. And if I can't find one, and I can't pick this Sierra Nevada Pale Ale because I already said it's against the rules, I'm going to look for a hop forward beer. Hopefully one that I recognize, like Golden Road if you're out west, or Sierra Nevada, I guess if you're wherever I am, I'm going to look for something with the word pale ale.
That's a good
Bell's Two Hearted, Founders. There's I don't want to drone on too much about this, but you kind of said it without saying it, Harrison, that the allegiance starts to grow more to the brewery than the beer. And there's truth to that. If I don't have a lot to choose from, Bell's, Sierra Nevada, Founders, Boston Beer, Dogfish Head, a lot of those breweries have just never disappointed me by making a bad beer. Or making a beer that I didn't know what I was going to get into when I opened it. So some of my allegiance will go to a brewery that I'm comfortable with as well.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's exactly. Well, yeah, right. I start there at the brewery level and kind of see what's new. In fact, I was there today, and Highland has a Rising Tide. It's a hazy IPA, and I was like, ooh, that'll probably, it's their next trip. That's going to be my weekend. Kind of planning trips ahead. But with too much thought, too much thinking involved in it. But it's fun.
Random fun. I think you're right in that Highland is one of the first craft breweries to open up in North Carolina, if not just Asheville. Yep. And they have it's a Scottish inspired brewery in the name and the logos. But they were originally, that brewery was built by a Jamaican-born American citizen who was like an MIT rocket scientist or something, just killed it, decided to retired early. And the story goes that his wife was like, you can't just stay home all the time. You're driving me crazy. So he said, let me start home brewing beer, and then eventually created Highland Brewing in Asheville, and obviously that city embraced it quite a bit after.
Yeah, that's right. That's a great origin story for a beer that everybody knows. It's a craft beer head in this state. One of the first ones I had when I moved here was Gaelic Ale. Cool. Wow, we covered a lot. We went back and forth and in and out of time. This has been a fun episode, John. We dove deep and shared a lot of crazy metaphors that I hope made sense to everybody, at least in some regard.
Hopefully the pantomiming on YouTube helped out a little bit. Yep, if time is a flat circle, this has only been just one instant.
Hasn't even started yet.
And in the same instance, it is about to end.
That's right.
So thanks for listening and for making it this far. Send us your questions for the Beer 101 segment. If you have any would you rather questions you'd like Harrison and I to cover, please feel free. If you have anything you'd like to say to us at all, join us on the Facebook group. Send us an email. The email address is going to be in the show notes. Watch us on YouTube. Leave a comment there. There's multiple ways you can find us in this computer world. And also keep your beers close and cold. I just made that up on the spot. Show notes will be available at podcast.untappd.com. If you have any questions or feedback, you know where to connect with us. Otherwise, I guess...
Yeah, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Cheers.